The deep silence of space broke with a flash of light as the human exploration vessel Pathfinder emerged from its jump point. Captain James Miller stood on the bridge, his experienced eyes scanning the star charts. After 20 years of space exploration, he thought he had seen everything. He was wrong. "Captain, we have multiple contacts." The young radar officer's voice cracked with excitement. "They're huge, sir. Nothing like we've ever seen before." Miller stepped closer to the main view screen. His heart skipped a beat. 3 massive ships hung in the darkness ahead, their metallic hulls gleaming under the light of distant stars. Each one was at least 10 times the size of the Pathfinder. Their design was clearly alien, all sharp angles and geometric patterns that no human architect would have chosen. "Any signals?" Miller asked, keeping his voice steady despite the tension building in his chest. "They're scanning us, sir," replied Communications Officer Kate Brown. She had served with Miller for 5 years, and he had never heard her sound nervous before. "Wait, incoming transmission." The bridge speakers crackled to life. A deep mechanical voice filled the room. "Unauthorized species vessel, you have entered Imperial space. Submit to immediate boarding and species classification. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. You have 5 minutes to comply." Miller looked around his bridge. 20 faces stared back at him, waiting for orders. The Empire, whatever it was, clearly expected either submission or suicide. But humans had always been good at finding the third option. "Kate," he said with a slight smile, "remember that old saying about hitting them with everything we've got?" She nodded, confused. "Open all channels. And I mean all of them. Every frequency, every band. I want you to broadcast everything." "Everything, sir. Everything. Every TV show, every movie, every song, every podcast. All of human entertainment and culture. All at once. Full power." Kate's eyes widened as she understood. Her fingers flew across the control panel. "Broadcasting now, sir." The effect was immediate. The Imperial ship's scanning beams flickered and wavered. Their perfect formation shifted slightly as their sensors struggled to process the tsunami of data flowing from the Pathfinder. "They're receiving cat videos, sir," Kate reported, trying to suppress a laugh. "Also 3 different soap operas, the complete works of Shakespeare, every episode of every cooking show ever made, the entire history of rock and roll, and about 1 million memes." The mechanical voice returned, but this time it sounded confused. "Cease this. What is this? Is that a small earth creature playing a keyboard? And why is that human crying over a cooking competition? What is a rickroll?" Miller couldn't help but smile. "Send them more. Everything we've got. Let's show them what humanity is really about." For the next hour, the Pathfinder's crew watched as the mighty Imperial ships drifted in space, their systems overwhelmed by humanity's creative output. Finally, a new voice came through, less mechanical, more bewildered. "Human vessel," it said, "your response to first contact is unprecedented. The Imperial Council requests explanation of these transmissions, particularly the one with the small feline requesting sustenance through improper spelling. Tell them," Miller said to Kate, "that this is just the beginning. Ask them if they'd like to know more." As Kate relayed the message, Miller looked out at the Imperial ships. They no longer seemed as threatening. In fact, they looked almost lost, like massive geometric sculptures adrift in a sea of human creativity. The response came back quickly. "The Imperial Council accepts your offer of cultural exchange. Please, explain the concept of memes to us." Miller sat back in his captain's chair, grinning. First contact hadn't gone anything like the training simulations. It had gone much better. Sometimes the best way to face an overwhelming force wasn't to fight it or submit to it, but to simply share what makes you human. He looked at his crew and said, "Well, folks, looks like we're about to give the galaxy's biggest empire a crash course in human culture. Kate, start with the classics. Show them. Never gonna give you up. Commander Root of the Imperial Fleet stood frozen in his command center, his gray fingers hovering over the control panel. Around him, his crew stared at their screens with a mixture of confusion and growing fascination. None of their training had prepared them for this. "Sir," his second-in-command spoke up, "the human broadcasts have spread to all decks. The crew, they're watching them." Root rubbed his temples. In his 300 years of service to the Empire, he had never faced such a situation. His ship's computer systems were working perfectly, yet they were filled with what humans called entertainment. The latest report showed that several junior officers were now deeply invested in something called a cooking show. "Have we identified their weapons systems?" Root asked, trying to maintain some military focus. "Well," his weapons officer said, looking embarrassed, "we found their military databases, but they're mostly filled with something called action movies. The crew is particularly interested in something called Die Hard." Root walked to the main viewing screen, which currently displayed hundreds of small windows, each showing different aspects of human culture. In one, tiny earth animals called cats performed illogical but somehow entertaining actions. In another, humans competed to create the perfect sandwich. "Get me the High Command," Root ordered. The screen changed to show the stern face of High Admiral Stone, the Empire's supreme military commander. "Report, Commander," Stone barked. "Have you contained the human threat?" "Sir," Root began, then paused as he heard laughter from the crew deck below. "The situation is complicated. They're not attacking us, exactly. They're just sharing." "Sharing what?" "Everything, sir. Their art, their music, their stories, their memes." Root pronounced the last word carefully, still unsure what it meant. "The crew is becoming distracted." "Distracted?" Stone's face darkened. "By what?" Just then, Root heard singing from the crew quarters. He recognized the tune. It was that strange human song about never giving up that had been playing earlier. "Sir, you need to see this yourself," Root said, sending a data packet to High Command. "The humans, they don't act like any species we've encountered. They don't follow proper protocols. They just create things, constantly, and share them with everyone." Stone's eyes widened as he viewed the data. "Is that a human child yelling about it being Wednesday?" "Yes, sir. Apparently, they find it amusing. There are thousands more like it." "This is unprecedented," Stone muttered. "The Empire's protocols don't cover this kind of first contact. What are their demands?" Root checked his latest report. "They want to share recipes and start a movie night. They're suggesting something called Star Wars. They say we might find it interesting." A High Admiral's face showed a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Are you saying that instead of preparing for war or surrendering, they want to entertain us?" "Yes, sir, and it's working. 3 of my bridge crew are now debating something called pineapple on pizza. It's apparently a major cultural dispute among humans." Stone was quiet for a long moment. "Continue monitoring the situation, Commander." But he glanced around as if making sure no one else could hear. "Send me more of those cat videos. For tactical analysis, of course." After the transmission ended, Root looked around his command center. His perfectly disciplined crew was changing before his eyes. 2 officers were trying to replicate a human dance move. Another was attempting to explain human jokes to his colleagues. Root sighed and sat down in his command chair. The Empire had encountered many species over its 10,000 years of existence. They had protocols for dealing with warriors, diplomats, and merchants. But they had never met anyone quite like humans, a species that conquered not through force, but through an endless stream of creativity, humor, and cats. He found himself wondering what would happen next, and though he would never admit it, he was also wondering what would happen in the next episode of that cooking show. Lord Bright, chief negotiator of the Imperial Diplomatic Corps, straightened his ceremonial robes for the 10th time. After 6 hours of waiting, the human representatives were finally arriving at the Imperial Palace on Capital World. He had prepared for every possible diplomatic scenario. Or so he thought. "My lord," his assistant whispered, "the humans are. They're not using the grand entrance." "What?" Bright turned to see the human delegation walking through the staff entrance, chatting with the kitchen workers and maintenance staff. Captain Miller of the Pathfinder led them, carrying something that smelled wonderful. "Hello there," Miller called out cheerfully. "Hope you don't mind. We brought coffee and donuts. Your kitchen staff told us you've never tried them." Bright watched in horror as centuries of protocol crumbled. The humans were treating the most important diplomatic meeting in Imperial history like a casual breakfast get-together. "This is the Imperial Palace," Bright said stiffly. "There are procedures." "Try the chocolate one," Miller interrupted, holding out a box of donuts. "They're still warm. We got your kitchen staff to help us make them fresh." Against his better judgment, Bright took a donut. The sweet taste made his eyes widen. Behind him, other Imperial diplomats were already reaching for the treats, completely forgetting about proper protocol. "Now," Miller said, pulling out chairs for everyone, "let's talk about cultural exchange programs. We've got millions of students back on Earth who'd love to learn about Imperial history, and we figured you might be interested in some of our art, music, and maybe our cooking." "This is not how diplomatic negotiations work," Bright protested weakly, even as he reached for another donut. "There should be formal presentations, ceremonial exchanges." "Oh, we brought those too," said Anna West, Earth's cultural attaché. She pulled out a tablet. "But first, want to see some pictures of my dog? His name's Buddy, and he just learned how to high-five." The Imperial diplomats crowded around the tablet, completely forgetting their training. Bright watched as his carefully planned negotiation dissolved into casual conversation and laughter. "We should discuss serious matters," he tried again. "Border treaties, trade agreements. We'll get to those," Miller assured him. "But first, tell me what you think about the coffee. We brought different flavors. Ever tried a caramel macchiato?" 5 hours later, Bright sat in his office, trying to make sense of what had happened. The humans had somehow achieved more in one informal meeting than most species managed in years of formal negotiations. They had proposed student exchange programs, shared their entertainment networks, and even gotten approval for something called a food truck festival in the Imperial capital. His computer screen showed the latest reports. Imperial citizens were already trying to replicate human recipes. Someone had started a cafe in the diplomatic quarter, and the palace kitchen staff was demanding barista training. "My lord," his assistant called from the door, "the human delegation left something for you." It was a small package containing a coffee maker, some coffee beans, and a note that read, "For those long diplomatic meetings. P.S. We're starting a weekly game night at the embassy. Nothing brings people together like board games. You're invited." Bright looked at the coffee maker, then at the formal diplomatic protocols on his desk. After a moment's hesitation, he pushed the protocols aside and picked up the instruction manual for the coffee maker. The Empire had always believed that diplomacy was about power, ceremonies, and strict rules. But these humans were showing them a different way, one built on shared experiences, simple pleasures, and genuine connections. As he figured out how to make his first cup of coffee, Bright realized that the Empire wasn't just facing a diplomatic situation. They were experiencing a revolution, one donut and coffee cup at a time. The young Imperial citizen named Dash walked quickly through the back alleys of Capital City, his hood pulled low over his face. Under his arm, he carried something that could get him in serious trouble, a package of Earth coffee beans and the latest collection of human music files. He knocked 3 times on a hidden door. Someone inside whispered, "What's the password?" "I like pizza," Dash replied, using the Earth phrase that had become their secret code. The door opened to reveal a packed room. 50 young Imperials sat on cushions, drinking coffee from Earth-style mugs and watching something on a large screen. Today's showing was an Earth movie called Ferris Bueller's Day Off. "You're just in time," his friend Light said, making space for him. "We're starting a new Earth tradition today, something called Casual Friday." She pointed to her clothes, which weren't the usual imperial formal wear, but instead looked like human jeans and a t-shirt. "The council will never approve," Dash whispered, but he was smiling. "That's the point," Light replied. "Humans taught us we don't need approval to be ourselves." Across the city, hundreds of similar secret meetings were happening. Young Imperials gathered in hidden rooms, sharing Earth culture and trying new things. They called themselves the Freedom Friends, inspired by human ideas about personal choice and expression. In one room, they learned Earth dances. In another, they practiced making jokes, something the Empire had always considered a waste of time. Some groups even started bands, playing Earth music on instruments they had built based on human designs. But it wasn't just young people. Even some older Imperials were secretly changing. Commander Root now had a cat, though he told everyone it was for research purposes. Lord Bright had been seen wearing casual clothes on his days off, and rumors said that even High Admiral Stone hummed Earth songs when he thought no one was listening. Breaking news: the Imperial broadcast system announced suddenly. All across the city, screens lit up with an emergency message. "The Imperial Council has declared human culture dangerous. All Earth items must be turned in. All contact with humans will be limited." In the secret room, everyone got quiet. Then Light stood up. "They don't understand," she said. "You can't stop ideas by making rules. The humans taught us that." Others nodded. One by one, they started sharing their own thoughts, something that had never happened before humans arrived. Before, everyone just listened to the council. Now, they were thinking for themselves. "My mother loves cooking Earth food," one person said. "My father started telling jokes at dinner," another added. "I learned to play guitar," a third spoke up. "It makes me happy." Dash looked around the room. These weren't rebels planning to fight the Empire. They were just people who had discovered new ways to live, thanks to humanity's influence. Just then, Dash's communication device beeped. It was a message from Captain Miller of the Pathfinder. "Heard about the Council's decision. Don't worry. You can't stop the spread of good ideas. P.S. Here's a new recipe for chocolate chip cookies." Dash smiled and passed his device around. Soon, everyone was copying the recipe, planning to share it with others. The Council could make all the rules they wanted, but they couldn't stop what was already happening. The Empire had always controlled its people through strict rules and formal structures. But humans had shown them something different: the joy of personal choice, the fun of creativity, and the power of sharing ideas. As Dash watched his friends planning their next secret meeting, he realized that the real revolution wasn't happening in government buildings or military bases. It was happening in living rooms and back alleys, spread by cookies and coffee, music and movies, jokes and friendship. The Empire was changing, one person at a time. The Imperial Council chamber was in chaos. For the first time in 10,000 years, the 12 High Counselors were shouting at each other. The cause of their anger sat on the giant screen before them: pictures of Imperial citizens holding peaceful protests across 100 worlds. "This is unacceptable." High Counselor Frost slammed his fist on the table. "They're demanding something called democracy. They want to choose their own leaders." "It gets worse," High Counselor Rain added. "Look at what they're wearing." The screen showed Imperial citizens in casual Earth clothes, drinking coffee and sharing food while they protested. At the head of the table, the Grand Emperor watched silently. In all his years of rule, he had never seen anything like this. His people were changing, and for the first time, he couldn't stop it. "The humans must be expelled," Frost demanded. "We must close our borders." "It's too late," said High Admiral Stone, looking tired. "Our own military ships are playing Earth music on their communication channels. 3 star captains have started something called a book club." Just then, The chamber doors opened. Lord Bright walked in, and everyone gasped. The Empire's chief negotiator was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Keep calm and drink coffee." "My lords," Bright said, ignoring their shocked looks, "I bring news from Earth. They've invited all Imperial citizens to something called a cultural festival. They want to celebrate our differences and similarities." "Absolutely not." Frost stood up. "We cannot allow." 5 million citizens have already signed up. Bright interrupted, something that had never happened in Council history. "They're calling it the biggest party in Galactic history." The Council erupted again. In the confusion, the Grand Emperor noticed his youngest grandchild, Princess Star, sneaking into the chamber. She was holding something behind her back. "What do you have there?" he asked quietly. Star pulled out a plate of cookies. "I made them, grandfather. It's an Earth recipe. Would you like to try one?" The Emperor looked at the cookies, then at the chaos in his council chamber. He thought about how much his empire had changed since meeting the humans. His people were happier. They were creative. They were thinking for themselves. "Yes," he said, taking a cookie. "I would like that very much." The taste was wonderful. It reminded him of something he had almost forgotten. The joy of trying new things. "Silence," he called out. The council chamber went quiet. "For 10,000 years," he said, "we have ruled through power and fear. We thought this made us strong. But these humans have shown us something stronger. The power of sharing, of creativity, of joy." He stood up, still holding his cookie. "I have made my decision. We will not fight this change. We will embrace it. But the Empire's traditions," Frost began, "will evolve," the Emperor finished. "Just as they always have. The humans didn't conquer us with weapons. They changed us with kindness, with creativity, and yes, with cookies." He looked at the protests on the screen. His people weren't angry or violent. They were celebrating, sharing food, making music. "From this day forward," he announced, "the Empire will change. We will learn from Earth's example. We will find a balance between our traditions and new ideas." As if to prove his point, Princess Star started passing out cookies to the council members. One by one, even the angriest ones found themselves smiling as they tried them. The Empire was facing its biggest crisis ever. But maybe, the Emperor thought as he watched his council members enjoying their cookies, this crisis was exactly what they needed. 6 months after the Emperor's decision, Capital City looked like a different place. The once gray buildings now displayed colorful murals painted by both human and Imperial artists. Music filled the streets, a new blend of Imperial classical sounds and Earth rhythms that people called space jazz. In the city's central park, Commander Root watched his cat chase a toy mouse. Around him, Imperial children played Earth games like soccer and tag, while their parents sat on blankets having picnics. Nobody wore formal robes anymore, except for special occasions. Quite a change, isn't it? Captain Miller sat down next to Root, offering him a hot dog, the latest Earth food to become popular across the Empire. "Indeed," Root said, accepting the hot dog. "Did you know we're opening our first pizza restaurant next week? My nephew is the chef. He learned cooking from Earth videos." They watched as a group of young Imperials walked by, wearing t-shirts with both human and Imperial writing on them. The latest fashion trend was mixing styles from both cultures. "The Emperor wants to make more changes," Root continued. "Next month, we're having our first elections for local leaders. Some of my officers are running for office." Miller smiled. "And how does that make you feel?" "Honestly." Root patted his cat. "Happy." The Empire was like a machine before. Everything worked perfectly, but there was no joy. Now, he gestured at the park full of laughing people. "Now we're alive." Across the city, signs of change were everywhere. The Imperial News Network, once known for boring announcements, now had comedy shows and cooking programs. Schools taught both Imperial history and Earth cultures. Even the military had changed. Imperial ships now had recreation rooms and movie nights. In the old Imperial Library, Lord Bright sat with a group of students. They weren't studying ancient laws or military strategies. Instead, they were reading Earth books and discussing ideas. So in this story, a young Imperial named Flash said, "This mouse stands up to a lion." And that's allowed. That's the point, Bright explained. Earth stories often show that being small doesn't mean being powerless, just like how humans changed our mighty empire not through force, but through friendship. Meanwhile, in the Imperial Palace, Princess Star was teaching her grandfather, the Emperor, how to make chocolate chip cookies. The palace kitchen, once used only for formal state dinners, now smelled like a bakery. "The secret," Star said, "is to add extra chocolate chips. That's what my Earth friend taught me." The Emperor nodded seriously, taking notes. He had started keeping a cookbook, writing down recipes from both Earth and the Empire. He called it Galactic Fusion Cuisine. In the city squares, outdoor screens showed Earth sports games alongside Imperial ceremonies. People cheered for both. Some Imperial athletes had even started training to play Earth sports, hoping to compete in something called the Olympics. At the new Earth Imperial Cultural Center, Dash and Light were teaching a class about Earth dancing. Their students included Imperial officials, soldiers, and even a few council members. "Remember," Light said, showing them how to move, "dancing isn't about being perfect. It's about having fun." The idea of having fun was new to many Imperials. Before the humans came, everything had to have a purpose, a reason. Now they were learning that joy itself was a good enough reason to do something. As the sun set over Capital City, Miller and Root finished their hot dogs and watched the first stars appear. "Your empire is becoming something new," Miller said. "No," Root replied with a smile. "We're becoming something better." 1 year after the Pathfinder's first contact with the Empire, the galaxy had changed forever. The great square of Capital City was packed with millions of beings celebrating the first Galaxy Culture Festival. Humans and Imperials danced together under floating lights, while food stalls served everything from hot dogs to Imperial delicacies. Captain Miller stood on the main stage next to the Emperor, both wearing casual clothes. The Emperor had traded his golden robes for jeans and a t-shirt that read "Best Emperor in the Galaxy." "Did you ever imagine it would turn out like this?" Miller asked, watching the celebrations. The Emperor smiled, holding a cup of coffee, his new favorite drink. "When we first detected your ship, we thought we would either conquer you or destroy you. Instead, you conquered us with kindness and coffee." Below them, the changes were easy to see. Imperial guards played Earth games with human children. Council members sat at food stalls, arguing about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Commander Root's cat had become a social media star, with millions of followers across both human and Imperial space. "Your Majesty," Princess Star called out. "It's time for the announcement." The Emperor stepped forward, and the crowds grew quiet. A year ago, such silence would have come from fear. Now it came from friendship and respect. "My fellow beings," he began, "1 year ago, we thought we knew everything about power. We had the strongest ships, the strictest laws, and the most organized society. Then we met humans." The crowds cheered. The Emperor waited, smiling, before continuing. "They didn't try to fight our strength. Instead, they shared their music, their food, their jokes, and their friendship. They taught us that true power isn't about control, it's about connection." On giant screens around the square, images showed the changes of the past year. Imperial kids playing baseball, humans learning Imperial art, mixed cultural festivals, and countless moments of friendship between the two peoples. Today, the Emperor announced, "I'm proud to share our biggest change yet. The Imperial Council has voted to transform the Empire into the Galactic Federation of Free Peoples. Every world, including Earth, will have an equal voice. And yes, we'll still have pizza parties at every meeting. The celebration that followed was the biggest in galactic history. Humans taught Imperials to dance the Macarena, while Imperials showed humans their traditional light dances. Food from both cultures disappeared from the stalls as fast as they could make it. In a quiet corner of the square, Lord Bright sat with Commander Root, both enjoying ice cream cones, another Earth treat that had become wildly popular. "Remember when we thought humans would destroy our way of life?" Root asked. Bright laughed. "They did destroy it, by showing us a better way to live. Did you know my daughter is now studying to be a chef? A year ago, I would have been horrified. Now, I'm her biggest fan." As the night went on, Captain Miller found himself back on the Pathfinder's bridge, looking down at the celebrating city. His communications officer, Kate, joined him. "Sir," she said, "we're getting requests from 50 other galactic empires. They all want to know about Earth culture." Miller smiled, remembering that first contact a year ago. "Send them everything," he said. "Start with the cat videos." The galaxy was entering a new age, not one of conquest and control, but of sharing and friendship. As Miller watched the celebrations below, he realized that humanity's greatest strength had never been its weapons or technology. It had been their ability to turn strangers into friends, one cup of coffee at a time.